it's a just cause. And that's why sometimes when you even have doubts as to, should I be doing this? Should I be involved in this? And look at the chaos that's characterized our struggle. Then you keep reminding yourself, it's a just cause, no matter what. It could take forever. It could take 2 years. It could take 10 years. But the bottom line is that it's a just cause. It's a cause of a people who want to be free. And for me, it's all about freedom. It's the cause of a people who have been in chains. Look at 2-3 days ago, I saw students in one of the lycées in French Cameroon. They were chanting on the streets, demonstrating. Nothing happened. Nothing happened to them. Let a few students, children of Southern Cameroons extraction, go out on the streets and dare to demonstrate. And you see what happens to them.
Fellow Southern Cameroonians, with me today is one of the finest brains and activists within the Southern Cameroons War of Independence. This person doubles as the chairman of the Southern Cameroons Alliance movement. We are talking of no other person than Mr. Millan Atam. Mr. Milan, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'll start by saying, from one of your recent audio outings, you promised Ambazonians that you no more stay silent, and that every question that Ambazonians are dying to know or to hear your response, you are going to answer. And that's why we are having this session today.
Indeed. I know that for a long time, I have refused to talk on a number of things. Yes, indeed, I did say that as issues arise, I will address them. Sometimes it becomes important because when you let information go out on its own, then you're doing a lot more of damage control instead of actually having control over your narrative. So yes, you're right.
So before we begin,
yes,
who is Millan Atam when it comes to the Southern Cameroons liberation?
Well, it's funny because I can tell you everything I know about the struggle with ease, but when it comes to me, it's always been, I always feel questions which ask me to talk about myself. I have been in the struggle for as far back as I can remember. I'm a life activist. I would say way back while I was in my teens, I was already part of this struggle. In the 90s, the mid-90s, I was already part of the struggle. And way into the 2000s, some 20, 22, 24, 25 years ago, I was already part of most of the Yahoo groups, be it the Ambassador's Yahoo group or the Southern Cameroons Yahoo group, which kind of tacked both kind of the different schools of thought of our liberation struggle. I was part of these various groups. I followed the evolution, the discussions, the debates all these years. I still follow them to this day for those platforms which still exist. I'm still on them. I still follow. The only difference, I think, is that while I was very much a peripheral player in those years, since this phase of our struggle broke out, so from 2016, 2017, I then played a more central role because I dedicated time to do that, unlike before where it was more about just trying to understand. I was just one of the boys. I've been, over the past few years, been involved a lot more in the thinking and sometimes the direction of our struggle.
So being a key player in this liberation struggle of the Southern Cameroonians people, there have been a lot of media narrative about this conflict. As an insider, how can you define what the Southern Cameroonian problem is all about or is?
Well, like you said, there are lots of narratives. But for me, a very simple narrative is basically the replacement of a white colonial annexation of our territory that is being replaced by a black colonial administration of our territory. So when the colonials, the colonialists left, the British, the French, it just became, what happened is that automatically you had our brothers, those we viewed as our brothers on the east of the Mongo, taking over our territory and annexing it. Now, people would call it all kinds of names, the Anglophone struggle or the Anglophone crisis and so on, but it's a simple case of annexation, or if you like, colonialization of a people, its story, its history, its territory, its government, and especially its economy. And as you know, once you capture the economy of a people, everything else falls into place. Then, of course, you see they're working towards capturing our culture. They want to imbibe into us a different kind of education and so on. Very much that's what our struggle is about. And what I've been saying over the years is, as long as you have the Southern Cameroons not truly liberated, then in lots of ways, Africa is not liberated, because we are very symbolic of a problem that affects most of Africa.
So are you insinuating that the Southern Cameroon struggle is a just cause?
Of course it is. It has always been a just cause. When you ask me that question, one thing that always comes back to me is when, and this is funny because I'd already been in the struggle for over 20 years, and yet when the time came when we needed to engage, when you start asking yourself, the step I'm going to take is a matter of life and death, and I need to be sure that what I am doing is the right thing. And I remember driving all the way to Pretoria to meet Professor Anyangwe. I went to his house, sat with him as I'm sitting with you, and after having talked for a while, and then I stopped and I asked him, Prof, do you think we've got a strong case? Without missing a heartbeat, he said, watertight. He looked me in the eye and he said, watertight. That's all he said. And for me, that's all I needed. Just people who understand the story. And when you listen to people like himself and some of the veterans tell the story, it just tells you how it's a just cause. And that's why sometimes when you even have doubts as to, should I be doing this? Should I be involved in this? And look at the chaos that's characterized our struggle. Then you keep reminding yourself, it's a just cause, no matter what. It could take forever. It could take 2 years. It could take 10 years. But the bottom line is that it's a just cause. It's a cause of a people who want to be free. And for me, it's all about freedom. It's a cause of a people who have been in chains. Look at 2-3 days ago, I saw students in one of the lycées in French Cameroon. They were chanting on the streets, demonstrating. Nothing happened. Nothing happened to them. Let a few students, children of Southern Cameroon's extraction, go out on the streets and dare to demonstrate. And you see what happens to them. You don't need to. You don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that it's a just cause. How is it that 12, 13, 14-year-olds in East Cameroon, French Cameroon, are left alone to demonstrate? Because they've got the right to demonstrate. And yet Southern Cameroonian children, they go out to demonstrate. It always ends in bloodshed. Something is wrong. Something is, and so we don't even need to go into the analytics, the politics of it to understand that something is very wrong. You just need to look at simple examples such as that. Struggle, and everybody knows that the struggle was badly infiltrated, including SCOP. Every single facet of our struggle, regardless of what the group is that we were badly infiltrated. So how do you fix it?
You did mention about the quagmire that the Southern Cameroonian revolution has gone through. Mm-hmm. I would like to know from you, at what moment you actually out of the struggle? What happened? Were you hiding from something? And if you were, what were you hiding from?
Yeah, I've heard certain individuals say that I'm hiding. No, I wasn't hiding. For me, it was a strategic retreat. They say sometimes you need to take a step back in order to leap further. So hiding, who would I be hiding from? For me, it was a very, very strategic retreat. Number one, you work with comrades, people you think are comrades with whom you can jointly do things together. And then you realize that there is a lot of bad faith and character assassination. And so it was a strategic step to say, step back, let them on the center stage, and let's see where they take us. And for me, I told myself, I'm giving myself 5 years of just sitting back and let them move. That is since 2018. This is 2022. It's almost 5 years. So yes, I am having this interview a bit earlier than I had anticipated. For me, it wasn't about hiding. It was about saying, I am not going to want to sit in this arena with them, knowing that they don't have the capacity. It's easy for everybody to jump and say, oh yeah, we can do it. Let them do it. Close to 5 years down the line, have we progressed? Have we stagnated? Or have we regressed? And I think that's the question we should be asking ourselves today. So it hasn't been about hiding. I think it's just been about taking a step back. But secondly, telling myself that it makes very little sense to come in every day and make lofty speeches and threaten people and talk big when there's very little happening and when you can offer very little. I think we are now in a place where we can start saying confidently that we know where we want to go and that there is need for real leadership. We need to go back to the kind of leadership that we had initially established that can take our liberation struggle forward. As a movement, as SCCOP, we also took, and there was a time, probably 2018 or 2019, when we basically annulled the membership of every single member, re-established a smaller but very, very close-knit membership, and then we went underground. Is it that we were hiding? No. I think we were just working a lot more effectively. Within this period, we have met with more governments than we met over the years. We have been able to achieve a lot more than we achieved before. We have a clearer vision this time around than we had before. So for me, it was a strategic retreat. Very, very strategic, very clever, and very effective.
Now, you just mentioned about SCCOP, and I would like to ask more about that.
Yeah.
You talked about annulling the membership of every member. Was that constitutional?
Well, it wasn't a matter of being constitutional. I think it was more of the fact that we had come to realize that the struggle, and everybody knows that the struggle was badly infiltrated, including SCCOP. Every single facet of our struggle, regardless of what the group is that we were badly infiltrated. So how do you fix that? Number one, you go back. It's like a state of emergency. You ask yourself, do you want to sit with what you have and continue to turn around like a whirlwind without any progress, or you want to basically just, annul everything and then start anew, which is what we did. And I think it was probably the best decision that we took.
So looking at SCCOP presently,
yes.
we know we had SCCOPs in almost every region in the world, in South Africa, in Europe, in America. What is happening to SCCOP now? Because nowadays we don't hear much about them.
That's exactly what I said. It was a strategic step we took that basically said we're going underground, we operate that way, and then we are more effective in terms of what we want to establish. Now, one of the weaknesses of the struggle has been the fight for popularity and a visible show of strength. But sometimes a visible show of strength is not necessarily real strength. I'll give you an example. It's an ongoing debate that has been happening in the Alliance lately over the past month or two, where you have certain members, senior members, are like, no. The Alliance needs to grow. We have just a few movements which are members of the Alliance. You cannot have an alliance with 4 or 5 members and you think it's an alliance of Southern Cameroons. We need to bring in as many members as possible. But when they talk about as many members as possible, what are they talking about? It's basically what you find is 2 or 3 individuals, they rally, they sit in a city, they come up with a name, they register it, they create a website, and they say, okay, now we are a movement, or we are a CBO, community-based organization, we want to be a member. The question you ask yourself is, what is this CBO going to bring as value added? So you could have an alliance where you paste the name of 20, 30 movements or organizations in front of your door. But the question is, when you break it down to real membership, how many members do you have? It's almost insignificant. There's nothing. And sometimes you have the same individuals in the one group, and then the next, and then the next, and the next. So when you count it in terms of your membership, there's really nothing to show for it. And this has plagued our struggle. What we have been working on is effective membership. That says we are not so interested in membership as such at this point. Many people are disillusioned. What the struggle lacks and has been sorely lacking is leadership. And so we have been building structures which will enable us to put into place the right leadership. Once you have the right leadership, then the membership follows. You can't build a house from the roof. You have to start from the foundation, and then you build it and go. What is the vision of the leadership? What is the agenda? What's the plan of action? What's the strategy put in place? Those are questions that you need to answer. Once those questions are appropriately answered and you start to put in place the building blocks, the rest follows, and that's how membership comes in. So back to your question about scope. Scope was in every country, that's true. Scope was very, very visible. But maybe the mistake that was being made then was that we were so focused on visibility that we forgot effectiveness. What we are doing now is working more on effectiveness, and then visibility will come. And in fact, we took the very conscious decision of being invisible. We went underground. We started to do the work that very few people, if any, they've been doing in this struggle, our liberation struggle. We used that invisibility to set up meetings at very high levels. I know we've met with quite a few governments. We've met with a whole lot of firms. And in fact, we've knocked on so many doors you cannot even believe. So we were a lot more effective. And why were we more effective? We were not visible. A lot of what we did was not known. So there was very little avenue for sabotage. We accomplished a lot more because very few people knew what we were doing. Prior to that, there was a lot more sabotage happening. I mean, there is a meeting, high-profile meeting, which we set here in Johannesburg, had some really, really good progress and a clear action plan as to where we wanted to go, not just where we wanted, but where the partners wanted us to go. They had already set up meetings with a number of governments for us to meet, some high-level individuals within the government here, but also governments outside of South Africa and the rest of the African continent. What happened? Sabotage. The moment we had one person understanding this meeting took place, the next thing is that they went out there and sabotaged the whole thing. Now, what's the essence of that? It's like, if it's not me or if it's not us, then nobody gets it. We destroy it. And that has been the tendency. So we learn to operate a submarine. So you don't see the ship that is underneath the water. You just see the antenna. And that's how we've operated for the past, I would say, 3-4 years, like a submarine. Who baptized this meeting a conclave was the late Millan Atam. He did not attend, but he did make his submission to the first conclave to say, as you go into the conclave, those were his words, and I think we should have it in the records. As you go into the conclaves, this is my submission. And that's how the use of the word conclave came about.
Getting away from scope, we know the name Milan has been attributed to many things in the struggle or in the Amazonian War of Independence. One of that is Milan is the architect behind the rise of President SCCOP and as well as the architect behind the kidnap of the Naira 10 and adoption of the Naira 10 to Cameroon. I would like to know from you, what's your role in all of this? Were you?
I mean, people say a lot of things. If you put together, and I wish and I hope someday somebody will take the time to put together all the material of everything that has been said about me, I'm sure you can have quite a few PhD theses on that. The question, however, is how much in terms of percentage would be true of all these things. I don't know about the rise of SCCOP. I think in lots of ways he merits his own rise. I don't think that's something that can be and should be attributed to somebody else. Yes, you can always contribute to somebody's rise, but at the end of the day, they deserve and the plaudits need to be given to the individual in their own right. And I think that's where we should leave that. In terms of the kidnap at the Naira Hotel, it came as no surprise. Why should it come as a surprise? When you look at the individuals who were brought together at Naira Hotel, you have a whole host of people who were abducted, and I just happened not to be abducted. When you look at it, you have God-fearing people, people who live more respectable lives and so on. I have always been a maverick. I break rules. Generally, don't fit into that box of the way people would want to see me or all the other leaders. I'm not a churchgoer, for instance. I don't flash the Bible everywhere I go. And so it just beats common logic why God would allow for more pious men to be picked up, and yet somebody like myself doesn't get picked up. Secondly, you have individuals who they would have jubilated and throw a party if they heard that amongst the people picked up, I was one of them. It just happened that I wasn't. So it's just normal that such people would be throwing, they would come up with all kinds of theories. But then again, if you go back to 2018 after the abduction, and you actually pin it down to the individuals who were running stories about me having played a role in their abduction. If you put them on the one side and you put those who were involved in the embezzlement of SCCOP funds and so on, they fit like a glove. It's basically the same people. Now, why were they doing that? Because they saw that as an opportunity to push, to exact revenge or something. But then you also have those who saw it as an opportunity, like, oh, now they've been abducted, we need to cease, we need to confiscate this interim government. So we need to take it over, we need to hijack it. And as part of that, we need to get rid of Milan. How do you do that? Run a malicious campaign, which is what they did. But what they did not know is that I was not interested. In fact, that I had already signaled very clearly that I do not want to be part of this interim government. And I'd had a long conversation with SCCOP to say, you know what, I don't like what I see and I'm out. But then at the same time, we had a conversation that said, instead of just walking away and giving bad vibes to the struggle, why don't you walk away quietly so that people don't notice? And the idea was that I was going to phase out quietly as he builds his leadership, his government, and moves forward. That was it. So a lot of the malicious campaign was run by individuals who did not know a lot of things. But then I feel sorry for them because 4 years down the line, the truth, a lot is out there already. And again, how do you accuse somebody without any evidence? So it was just a malicious campaign, and I feel very sorry for them.
So what were your role during the organization of the various conclaves? I think 4 of them. And these conclaves eventually led to the formation of the government and the voting of President Sisiko Ayoktabe to head that government. What role did you play in all of this?
Well, I was very central to the conclaves, no doubt. In fact, I established the idea of a conclave. We need to give credit also to our comrades in South Africa who played a key role. The idea came, when the consortium led by Agbonkongo, Fontem Neba, and so on, at the very advanced stage of the negotiations which they were carrying out with Cameroon government at the time, we could pick up that they were going to get to a point of a checkmate. They were going to hit a roadblock. And so what do you do? And that's when, we had already started corresponding with them. But that's when it became clear to me that we needed to do something in order to safeguard the progress that they had made. And I remember that on the evening on which they were picked up, I had already corresponded with Dr. Fontem and had sent him some correspondence through a mutual friend who was supposed to deliver the package to him that night. And he had said specifically, come at night, don't come during the day. Unfortunately, he got picked up the evening before the night came, that he got picked up. By then, we had already started thinking ahead, what could happen and how do we make sure that we circumvent this, whatever could happen. So once that happened, it became clear to me what was the purpose of this arrest of Bala and Fontem and so on. It was very clear. The purpose was to make sure that they decapitate the struggle, destabilize it by going for the head, the brains, the people who are at the very forefront of it. Once you take them out, there is confusion, there is fear, and then the whole thing dies. And that's exactly what happened. Because once they were arrested, most of our activists on the ground went into hiding, people disowned the struggle, and so on. And a few of them, they ran across the border into neighboring countries, especially Nigeria. That was the purpose. But then we needed to ensure that there was some kind of continuity. And what better way to bring continuity than through unity? So the idea of the conclave, at least the first conclave at the time, was to ensure that I bring together our frontline leaders to sit in a room and issue a statement jointly, which would basically fly in the face of what La République was trying to do. So it was a very tactical move to circumvent and beat La République in the game that it was playing, which was decapitate the struggle and then it's over. You cut off the head, more heads come up. That was the whole idea. At the time, we didn't even call it a conclave. It was actually a closed door. I think it was a closed door meeting of sorts. The person who baptized this meeting a conclave was the late Millan Atam. He did not attend, but he did make his submission to the first conclave to say, as you go into the conclave, those were his words, and I think we should have it in the records. As you go into the conclaves, this is my submission. And that's how the use of the word conclave came about. And so the first conclave came, and then that was followed by the second conclave. After the second conclave, we selected Mr. Tassang to be the Secretary General of SCCOP that was formed in 2017. And it was at that point that I then transferred everything over to him. The first and second conclave, I was very much in charge. I made sure everything went well, smoothly. After the second conclave, I think somewhere around must have been the end of May, I then handed everything to Tassang. From that point, I think it's fair to say myself as an individual, but South Africa also as a community, then played a more of a backseat role when it came to the conclaves. The third conclave was actually organized by Tassang. The fourth conclave, you would say, yes, I was very central because at the time, I was the Secretary General of the Governing Council. And so I was very central to the organization, the conception, the planning, and everything of the fourth conclave.